Denver, early morning. A light breeze swept through a quiet corner of Colorado near Union Station, where the stone steps still held onto a thin layer of morning dew. There, beside a worn-out folding table and a small American flag neatly attached to the side of a wheelchair, a young man was carefully arranging bags of homemade snacks. His name was Jackson Cole, a former soldier who had served in Iraq and lost a leg to a roadside bomb. Beside him sat Max, his loyal service dog, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, never straying far from his owner. Jackson wasn't asking for pity. He sold beef jerky and trail mix, simple foods made from his mother's old recipes, just enough to get by and to hold on to the one thing that mattered most, his dignity. What Jackson didn't know was that very morning, an armored limousine would pull up to the curb. The door would swing open, and stepping out would be none other than the President of the United States, Donald Trump. That moment would change everything. If you believe in the power of resilience and second chances, hit that subscribe button and don't miss the stories that move the soul. That morning, the sky stretched high and clear, not a single cloud in sight. Sunlight hadn't yet pierced through the glass towers of downtown Denver when a wheelchair rolled to a stop near a quiet corner by Union Station. On it sat a man, carefully laying out bags of snacks on a faded folding table. His name was Jackson Cole, 54 years old, a former U.S. Army soldier who had served 2 tours in Iraq. 6 years ago, an IED blast on the roadside took his right leg below the knee. He came home with no medals, no cheering crowds, just a missing limb, sleepless nights, and a piece of paper labeled moderate PTSD diagnosis. Beside Jackson was Max, a Labrador Shepherd service dog wearing a vest that read, "Service dog, please don't pet." Max lay calmly, eyes tracking the hurried footsteps of morning commuters, never straying more than a few feet from Jackson. Jackson folded up the empty right pant leg, clipped it neatly with a metal fastener, then pulled a spray bottle from his backpack. He gently misted the small American flag pinned to the edge of the table, something he wiped clean every morning with a damp cloth and straightened at each corner, like his own personal ritual. The flag dried under the sun, its dark red stripes deeper against the white and blue, a reflection of his past, full of blood, but without regret. He sold 3 flavors of jerky, original, Texas heat, and honey ginger, the last one born from a sleepless night haunted by nightmares. He also offered a trail mix on almonds, walnuts, raisins, and bits of chocolate, following his mother's old recipe. Each small bag sold for $5, the large for $9. On good days, he'd sell 20 to 25 bags, enough to cover rent for a modest room in the 5 Points neighborhood and food for Max. Jackson didn't take cards, didn't sell online, and didn't deliver. Just a small metal cash box holding some change, a few folded bills, and a hand-drawn sign that read, "Veteran-made snacks, real ingredients, real stories." People passing by were often in a rush. Some glanced, nodded, and walked on. Others stopped, bought a bag, and said, "Thank you for your service." He'd smile and reply, "Thanks for supporting." It had been 9 months since Jackson first rolled up to this corner. He remembered every number. 2 times cops checked his vending permit. 1 time a drunk man kicked over his table. Jackson said nothing, just picked up every fallen bag and wiped each stain off his sign. 3 times the cold rain forced him and Max into the bus shelter, curled up tight without enough cash to buy a new coat. Some days he sold just 7 bags, not even enough to buy pain meds for his phantom knee, and still he came back. Because as he once told a curious little boy, not everyone needs snacks, but everyone needs a reason to wake up in the morning. This table's mine. To Jackson, that beat-up folding table was the new front line, and every bag he sold was another brick in the slow rebuilding of a life. It was 8:52 a.m. Like clockwork, Miss Teresa, 76 years old, stopped by, just as she did every Tuesday for the past 5 months. She bought 2 bags of spicy jerky and 1 trail mix without raisins. Always the same. My granddaughter finally got into the University of Colorado, Jackson. That's great. Tell her to eat more snacks, fuel for those study marathons. She says yours taste way better than the ones at the supermarket. They both laughed. Then she walked away. Jackson watched her go, calm in his eyes. Max lifted his head slightly when she waved goodbye. A soft breeze passed through, carrying the scent of fresh coffee from the corner cafe and the electric hum of a nearby bus. Jackson reached out and touched the wooden sign that read, "Handmade by a veteran." He brushed off the thin layer of dust with the sleeve of his shirt and sat up straighter. A new day had begun. Another small battle, and he was ready. Just before 9 a.m., the foot traffic around Union Station started to build. The breeze was crisp, but the sun was strong enough to make the windows of downtown high-rises glint like they'd been dusted with gold. Jackson was still there, sitting quietly after bidding Miss Teresa goodbye with his usual smile. His eyes drifted toward the street, as if waiting for something, though even he didn't know what. Max stretched, resting his head on Jackson's lap, drifting into a half-sleep amid the delicate peace of a typical morning. Everything felt as it always did, until the black SUVs rolled in. 3 armored government-plated vehicles glided to a silent stop across the street. A few passers-by looked on, surprised. Some raised their phones to record. Others simply stared, drawn in by instinct. Jackson frowned, not out of fear, but because the scene brought back a memory. An ambushed convoy in Mosul. That feeling, tight in the chest, never fully left, even after 6 years. Max stood up instinctively, body taut like a stretched cord. Jackson rested a hand on his head and murmured, "It's okay, buddy. Just a security visit." Then the middle SUV's door opened. A tall man with unmistakable blonde hair stepped out in a navy blue suit and a vivid red tie. No one had to introduce him. Jackson recognized him immediately. President Donald J. Trump, in Denver on a surprise tour to observe labor conditions and urban economic development. His appearance wasn't on any public itinerary, and stopping at this street corner certainly wasn't in anyone's game plan. Trump ignored the Secret Service agents, urging him to continue toward the station. Instead, he turned and stared at the small snack stand across the street. Something about the man in the wheelchair made him pause. It wasn't the hand-drawn sign. It wasn't even Max, whose eyes followed every movement of the security team. It was the way Jackson sat, upright, composed, unmoved, like a soldier still on duty at the edge of the battlefield. The president crossed the street toward Jackson, leaving behind the low protest of an agent. "Mr. President, this area hasn't been cleared." Jackson didn't speak. He simply nodded in a crisp, military-style salute. "What are you selling?" Trump asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a gravity that turned heads. "Beef jerky and trail mix, sir," Jackson replied, pointing to each type. "Homemade. My mom's old recipes." Trump picked up a bag of honey ginger jerky, flipping it over as if inspecting the packaging. "You a vet?" "Army, Iraq, 2 tours." "Right leg?" "IED, 2017. PTSD?" "Moderate level." The exchange was brief, no pity. 2 men, both battle-hardened in their own ways. Trump smirked. "Not many people say it that straight." Jackson shrugged. "I sell snacks, not sob stories." The president paused for a moment, then tore open the bag and pulled out a piece of jerky. He chewed slowly. "Tastes good, he said. "Real meat. No preservatives?" "No, sir. I can't afford additives." That made Trump laugh, a short, genuine chuckle. The crowd began to swell. A few had realized who he was. A whisper spread, "That's really the president." A local reporter appeared out of nowhere, holding up a mic. "Mr. President, any comment on your meeting with this veteran?" Trump waved the question away, didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned back to Jackson. If I have someone from my team reach out to talk more about a veteran employment program, would you be open to that? Jackson didn't look surprised. He nodded. If it's a real opportunity for people like me to find work, not posing for charity brochures, then yes, I'm in. The president nodded, pulled a gold-tipped pen from his suit pocket, scribbled something on the back of a business card, and handed it to a nearby aide. Get his information. Have it on my desk by tomorrow morning. Then he turned back to Jackson. His gaze held something sincere, something that didn't belong to a career politician. You did your part. Now it's our turn. And with that, he left, just as quickly as he'd arrived. But the silence he left behind lingered, like a ray of sunlight cutting across the shape of Jackson's life. Unexpected, warm, and almost too real. Max sat down, gently licked Jackson's hand, as if to say, yes, that just happened. Jackson didn't speak. He simply stared at the business card left on the table and let out a long breath. He hadn't sold many bags of snacks that morning. But maybe something far bigger had just begun. From a chance encounter no one could have scripted, between a wounded soldier and a president without an agenda. 3 months since Heroes Harvest officially launched, the small warehouse in River North was no longer filled with the sounds of drills, hammers, or fresh paint. Now the air carried the savory scent of marinating jerky, roasted garlic, cracked pepper, and toasted almonds. It wasn't a big space, barely 3,000 square feet, but inside were the stories of over a dozen men and women, veterans like Jackson Cole, learning how to rise again, not with weapons, but with hands and patience. Jackson no longer sat in his wheelchair on the street corner, but he kept a modest workspace by the window, where a small American flag stood, pinned to a frame of reclaimed wood. Below it hung his old sign, Veteran-Made Snacks. Real ingredients, real stories. Max now had his own spot under the desk, still quietly watching everyone who came and went, like a guardian who never needed training. The first week went almost perfectly. Orders came in from 3 local grocery stores. A Denver Post article praised the veteran spirit packed in every bag of snack. But like every real battle, business reality was never a straight line. On day 19, their only industrial dehydrator broke down mid-batch. Nearly 50 pounds of beef jerky half done. The heat cut out, and the control screen blinked with an error. Fried circuit board, said the repair tech after checking it. We need to order the part from Chicago, minimum 5 days. 5 days meant losing over 300 bags and missing 2 new delivery deadlines. I can use the manual drying racks, said Darlene, a former Army medic who now handled packaging. But we'll need shifts overnight. Jackson looked at her, then turned to Miguel, the former tank operator now in charge of supplies. I'll handle the flipping, Miguel said, raising his hand like he was still in formation. As long as there's coffee. They worked 4 straight nights. No one complained. No one left early. And on day 24, the shipment made it on time. Jackson rewarded them with a box of pizzas and a handwritten note. We don't need pity. We need a chance. And we just proved it. But the challenges kept coming. On week 7, a surprise inspection from the city health department arrived. The inspector, gray hair, sharp eyes, red pen in hand, walked the facility slowly. Prep area floors are a bit slick, she noted. No bilingual signage for operating procedures. Hand towels mixed with surface cloths. Jackson followed every step, filling a small notebook with notes. When the inspection ended, she said, You have 7 days to fix this. If not, your provisional license will be suspended. Jackson nodded. We'll get it done the right way. That night, the team met after hours. Jason, a soft-spoken former Air Force tech with PTSD, spoke up. I'll translate the protocols into Spanish. I used to do documentation for the Peru base. Sarah, injured in Afghanistan, volunteered to scrub the floors by hand. I've got it. Don't hire someone else. This is our place. Jackson didn't say much. His throat tightened just watching them. They weren't asking for anything. They just wanted to be trusted. 7 days later, the inspectors returned. This time only one line was written. Fully approved. Next review in 6 months. At the door, the inspector turned to Jackson. I used to think places like this were just symbolic, but you're actually doing it. Keep going. Jackson just smiled. His answer was still the same. We don't need pity. We need opportunity. Week 11 brought a television reporter. His first question, do you think President Trump did this for political gain? Jackson didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked the reporter through the workspace, the manual packaging line, the name tags of each veteran on the snack bags, and then pointed at Max, still resting beside the door. I don't care why he did it. I just know that today, 12 people who thought their lives were over have jobs, hold their heads high, and wake up with purpose again. That's all that matters. By the end of the month, Heroes Harvest signed a regional deal with a convenience store chain. Production had to double in 6 weeks. The team stood before the planning board, markers in hand, backs damp with sweat, eyes lit up like they were gearing up for an actual campaign. No one asked, can we do this? Only, where do we start? And when night fell, Jackson sat alone by the factory window. He looked at Max sleeping nearby, then turned to the little flag and gently brushed off a bit of dust with his sleeve. The flag was still there, and so was he. Another day down. Another small battle in reclaiming the meaning of life. And with every snack bag sealed, packed, and sent out. Heroes Harvest wasn't just feeding customers, it was saving the people who made it. Day by day. Denver, an early spring morning. The sky so blue it felt like the entire city was holding its breath. The large American flag in front of the new Heroes Harvest plant flapped in the breeze, gleaming beneath the morning sun. Across the freshly painted concrete, a single red ribbon stretched between 2 wooden posts, waiting quietly for a historic moment. Jackson Cole sat in a small office behind the packaging room, looking out the window. Today he wasn't standing alone on a street corner. No more folding table, no more small cash box or handwritten wooden sign. In front of him now stood over 40 veterans dressed in olive green Heroes Harvest uniforms, forming 2 rows of honor along the entrance path. They had served in the Navy, the Air Force, the Army. Some had lost limbs, some bore invisible scars, some had only recently completed rehab. But this morning they stood tall, heads high, shoulders squared, like warriors ready for a new kind of mission. Max, Jackson's loyal service dog, sat beside him, quiet and still, as if he too knew that this day was unlike any other. At exactly 9:58 a.m., the motorcade arrived. A line of sleek, black SUVs with bulletproof windows rolled in, led by a special armored Cadillac. The door opened and President Donald J. Trump stepped out, dressed in a Navy suit and a deep red tie. The color of the flag, of fire, of those who refused to be broken. Behind the barricades, the crowd, citizens, media, and dozens of other veterans burst into applause. Some saluted, others quietly wept. Trump didn't head straight to the podium. He walked first to Jackson. They shook hands, long, firm, and real. No words needed. Then Trump knelt and patted Max's head. "Still working hard, soldier?" he said, half joking, half sincere. As they climbed the stage together, a light wind stirred the flags on the uniforms below. Jackson stood to the right, Trump to the left. And then he began. No notes, no teleprompter, no staff whispering in his ear. "Today, I'm not just here to cut a ribbon for a factory. I'm here to acknowledge a truth, that resilience, discipline, and a spirit of service don't end when a soldier hangs up the uniform. They simply change form, and Heroes Harvest is living proof of that. Cameras flashed non-stop, but inside the facility no one moved. They listened, not because it was the president speaking, but because it was their story being told. Jackson Cole, a soldier who lost a leg, a loyal dog, and a bag of snacks sold on the side of the road, reminded us that veterans don't need pity, they need opportunity. And when given that, they do extraordinary things, not for themselves, but for their community, for this nation. He paused, then raised the ceremonial scissors. Jackson joined him, one hand of steel, the other once held a rifle. And together they cut the red ribbon as the crowd erupted in applause. Behind them, the Heroes Harvest sign gleamed in the sunlight, a soldier's helmet resting atop a bundle of golden wheat. Beneath it, the slogan, "Crafted with honor, made to heal." The media swarmed for photos, but Jackson looked only at his team, Darlene wiping her eyes, Miguel placing a hand over his heart, like a vow, Sarah gripping the hand of the vet beside her. Men and women who once believed their lives were over, now standing at the start of something new. Trump stepped down from the stage, shaking hands with each employee. At the end of the line, he turned back to Jackson and said loudly for all to hear, "This isn't just a factory opening. It's our message to the world that America does not leave its soldiers behind." And then he left. No fanfare, no brass band, only the sound of work, measured, purposeful, steady, resumed, packing, slicing, drying, like always. And Jackson? He walked back inside, rested his hand on the old wooden sign that once stood beside his wheelchair at Union Station. Now it hung beside a framed letter from the president, a statewide supply contract, in the first payroll sheet for 42 employees. Beneath it, carved by hand, were the words, "We don't ask for pity, we ask for work." Today they had done just that, and tomorrow they'd do it again. They once fought for America, with their youth, with their blood, with parts of their bodies they would never get back. They returned home not to medals, not to airports filled with cheers, but with invisible wounds and a silent question echoing inside. Am I still useful? Then a hand was extended, not in pity, but in the offer of a second chance, and they took it, as if taking hold of their lives once more. From a quiet street corner in Denver to a factory glowing with purpose, Heroes Harvest is more than just a veteran-made snack brand. It's the heartbeat of gratitude, America's unspoken answer to those who once protected it. A promise made in action. We haven't forgotten. And now, it's our turn to fight for you. That's why every bag from Heroes Harvest carries more than flavor. It carries hope, dignity, and rebirth. And that is what truly nourishes a nation. Before meeting Elon Musk, China was just a trade rival in Barron Trump's mind. A label his father often emphasized during press conferences and speeches. Trade deficits, imbalanced imports and exports, warnings about tech espionage. These phrases had been repeated so many times that to Barron, China had become nothing more than a symbol to conquer in the grown-ups game of geopolitics. But in just a few hours sitting across from Elon Musk, that image began to crack. The first fracture came from the story of Mrs. Leon, a frail elderly woman with trembling hands but an open heart. She had survived the brutal days of the Cultural Revolution without letting hatred overtake her compassion. Elon said it was Mrs. Leon who instilled in her son, Li Wei, a current engineer at SpaceX, the values he admired most: discipline, responsibility, and forgiveness. "You know," Elon said, handing Barron an old photo of Mrs. Leon, "she was once tied up in a village square just for keeping an English grammar book. But after the war, she still taught her son, don't hate someone just because they're stronger. Strength isn't a fault. arrogance is. Barron sat still. He remembered the stern look on his father's face every time China came up, as if they were sworn enemies. But the face of Mrs. Lian in the photo was different. There was no hatred, only the depth of endurance and mercy. Then Elon shared another story about someone he called a silent hero of the South China Sea, Uncle Zhang, a fisherman from Hainan Island, China. Barron couldn't hide his surprise. "I don't get it, sir. What do fishermen have to do with tariffs?" Elon just smiled and began. "One time I flew to China to assess potential for building nearshore wind energy stations. During that trip, I met Mr. Zhang, a man almost 70 years old, the head of a small fishing crew. He told me there were nights they'd sail out only to face not just crashing waves, but massive ships, 10 times their size from other countries, trying to push them out of their traditional waters." "I guess he was angry?" Barron asked. Elon shook his head. He just smiled, a wrinkled smile, but without bitterness. He said, "Sure, I'm scared, but the sea is my home. How can I survive if I abandon it?" Elon pulled out his phone and showed Barron a short handheld video. A tiny wooden boat, its sides weathered and peeling, stood firm in front of a towering white vessel cutting through the water. On the boat, a few men held up a hand-painted banner. "We do not seek war, but we will not retreat." Barron's heart beat faster. For the first time, he felt a tightness in his chest watching people he'd only ever known through dry reports and import statistics. "You know," Elon said slowly, "when I asked Mr. Zhang what he thought of America, he just shrugged and said, 'America used to fight China hard back then, but now I like Tesla cars.'" Then he laughed, a real laugh, not bitter, just honest. Barron laughed too, but the smile quickly faded into a thoughtful gaze. He felt himself being pulled out of the comfort zone of assumptions. People like Mrs. Lian and Uncle Zhang, they didn't fit the image of China that his father often painted during policy briefings. "I used to think China was an adversary," Barron whispered, "but now they're people, a mother, a fisherman, a worker." Elon looked at him, not with judgment, but with quiet seriousness. "Do you see anything familiar in them and Americans?" "Yes," Barron replied. "They work hard. They love their families. They just want to live in peace. Maybe we just haven't looked long enough to see it." In that moment, with Texas sunlight spilling through the office windows, something in Barron shifted. No drama, no declarations, but deep, like an underground stream changing its course. He felt himself move from opposition to empathy, and no one had to force it. He just needed to listen, to be told, and to witness. He turned to Elon, voice soft but steady. "Do you think, if my dad heard these stories, he might change?" Elon paused for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally said. "But I do know this. People can only hate what they don't understand. Once you understand, hating becomes really hard." Barron nodded, eyes still fixed on the screen. On that old fisherman standing on a tiny boat in the vast sea.